once again, welcome to the Global Training Series. This is our first training, and this is the Igniting Divine Union training series. We're going to be together for a series of 3 Tuesday evenings, and for those of you that are listening to it on replay, we'll be delivering those replays over the course of the next couple of weeks. And this is an opportunity, as we talk about divine union, to talk about the sacred path of love and ecstasy. And what does that mean? And how do you get there from where you are? And it is my honor and my privilege to share something that is near and dear to my heart. This topic is one that I've never shared in this particular forum. I've talked about it in some of my deeper programs, and yet there is a richness and a newness to this content that has been just unfolding since I planned this series a little over a month ago. So thank you for being here. In this first training, we are talking about the power of your attractive essence and how to discover and align with the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And we're going to talk about how those show up in you. And we're going to talk about Siri's deciding to talk. So we'll shut Siri off. There we go. And we're going to talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine and how they express within you, how they express between you, and what happens when you come into divine alignment, true alignment with those energies. Because I will say right here in the very beginning, we are actually conditioned to be so out of alignment with those essential energetic essences. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight in training 2, and I'll share more with you about training 2 as we close this evening. But we'll talk about why the masculine and feminine fight, why they get into conflict, and how to turn that conflict into something that is uniting, turning conflict into communion where you are happy and in love. So we will talk about that in training 2, and then we'll have a third training where we talk about that sacred path. So with that, when we talk about aligning with that essence, there are times that there is the spark of chemistry, and there are times that there isn't. There are times that we feel like passionate lovers, and there are times that it's more like the friend and roommate zone. So we're going to explore how you can be in the know, so to speak, how you can be empowered and how you can be alive in the essence of your sexual energy. And it is so much more than sex. It is about your life force energy and what it is that creates the spark of juice and joy and love and ecstasy and passion. And we're going to dive into all of that tonight. I truly want to thank you, as I started to say before I had my technical difficulties, that I truly want to thank you for being here tonight and for honoring your path of love, whatever that looks like right now. And it may look like roses and you want to have it be even brighter and even more sensual and juicy, or it may be painful. It may be a time that your heart is aching, or that you're longing for more, or you're frustrated, or you're even considering giving up on this idea of love. But when you show up here, when you take this time, not only will you transform your life, you will also become a ripple effect. You will take this forward, whether you share it with anyone or not. And that's the magic of love, is that it expands and it grows each time any one of us opens more deeply. So thank you for showing up, for you living the ecstatic life that you're meant to have, and for living this path of love. You are in the right place. You've shown up here for this training. If you know there's more to love and sex and passion than what you've experienced, whether again it's been through frustration or you just know that there's more. You're in the right place. If you've seen that passion fizzle or love fade, this is the place to be. If that heart aches and you really want to find the essence and the joy of love, this is the place to be. If you're holding yourself back, which so many of us do, we don't play full out when it comes to dating and relating. We'll find out how important that is. If you're a woman and you feel powerful and strong and you can handle life, and somehow that intimate love eludes you, you can't find that man or that woman that will meet you and see you and go to the places that you know you're capable of going, this is for you. And if you are that great guy, whether again, you're attracted to women or you're attracted to men, but you're that guy and you don't get seen for how great you are. You do so much and it never feels like enough. You're in the right place. And I'm honored to be in service. So with that, knowing that this training is for you, here's what we're up to tonight. And this is, again, just the beginning of the journey that we are embarking on in this series. We're going to talk about why the divine feminine and the divine masculine cannot live without each other. So often we try to push one or the other away. And it is really a dance of the two. And we're going to dive deeply into that tonight. We're going to talk about how society and the last 50 to 60, 70 years have neutered and neutralized our sexual chemistry and what that's doing in our relationships, how it's wreaking havoc. We're going to talk about how to know what your primary sexual essence is and what that means and why you care. And it's incredibly important if you want that depth of ecstasy and love. We're going to look at the yin-yang symbol in a brand new way. At least for most of you, it's going to be a brand new way, and how that actually shows you the path to turning up the heat and turning up the love. We're going to talk about if you've had the experience of why are the ones that I'm attracted to not attracted to me, or why was he attracted to me and now he's not, or why was she all hot and now she's not. What happens and how to change that. Then, as we get towards the end of our time together, we're going to talk about the 5 ways that you probably unknowingly extinguish that spark of attraction. You douse the flames of passion and love, and you don't even know it. Because most of the time, you think you're actually enhancing it, and you're not. We're going to talk about that friend and roommate zone and exactly how you get there and exactly how you stay out. And we're going to talk about why the opposite sex can drive you crazy and turn you on all at the same time. And we'll begin that topic tonight, and then we're going to continue that one in trainings 2 and 3. Particularly in training 2, we're going to dive even deeper into that topic. And then we're going to talk about this roadmap to sacred love, to ecstatic ecstasy, and how you can walk that path for you and your heart and your being and your passion. Many of you are getting a chance to meet me for the first time, so I thought I'd take a moment and share why I do what I do, why I am so passionate about this topic of divine union. And it goes back, honestly, to childhood. It goes back to a little girl who craved love and who never really believed that she was really lovable. And it started early on when my parents split. And as so many children do, they go, what did I do wrong? Why did dad leave? How could I have changed it? And I started to take on responsibility. And I started to take on a whole lot of beliefs about myself, about my lack of greatness, my lack of lovability. I used to wear a t-shirt. It was a little pink t-shirt with a puppy dog on it that said, if I follow you home, will you keep me? And it was this like for me, it was this hunger to really know that you loved me. And then fast forward as my mom struggled with men and relationships, and I watched her go through relationship after relationship. And I made some pretty lousy belief systems in my head about men and about relationships, particularly that they don't last. You can't trust men. They're not there for you. And it just reinforced that idea that I wasn't enough. And then fast forward to meeting, I so surprisingly, at least for me, met who I thought was Prince Charming, 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyed, par golfer, concert pianist, valedictorian, and he was interested in me. And I ignored all the signs of why it wasn't a good fit, because this seemingly Prince Charming wanted me, and I didn't think I was worthy. But fast forward, yes, he proposed, yes, we got married, and 4 years later we were divorced. And I was really unhappy and really miserable. And in that time, I was so frustrated sexually, couldn't have an orgasm. It was never enough. He couldn't love me. He couldn't make love to me in the way that I wanted to be made love to. And I couldn't even tell him what that was. But I knew I wasn't satisfied. And that's where the blessing came. As I got more and more frustrated with men, and I kept blaming men, and I kept trying to figure out why I couldn't have orgasms, I finally found myself on the path. And the primary wake-up call is actually the core topic that we're going to talk about tonight. And it was this masculine and feminine dynamic and how to really come into who I was as a woman. I have an electrical engineering degree and an MBA, and I was in the oil and gas and high-tech industries. And I was about as masculine as you could be, and I was proud of it. How could I outman the men? And needless to say, that also contributed to the demise of my marriage. And so it was that wake-up call to the divine feminine and the divine masculine that ignited me on a path to know that I would leave corporate in a very short period of time so that I could serve women, to come into who they are. Doesn't matter masculine or feminine, as we'll talk about, but who you are. And then also to serve the men, to come into who you are so that the masculine and the feminine, in whatever way that expresses in our bodies, can come together and reignite this love, this passion. And as we journey forward, I'll share in the other trainings some of my sacred sexuality journey and how that has ignited the sacredness and the ecstasy. And we'll talk tonight that sacred does not mean it is not passionate. And that's a false belief that we'll hold, that if we hold reverence and sacredness, that somehow it gets boring. So not the case. It is the place where it is mind-blowing and it is ecstatic like you've never even imagined. So this is why I do what I do. This is why I am so honored to share this with you and for those that I get to dive deeply with in my program work. Thank you for this journey and may it serve you. With that, this is a path. It is the path of soul love. It is the path of sacred ecstasy. And it is not a destination. This is something that keeps expanding and keeps opening and keeps getting juicier and better all the time. So know that wherever you are on your journey of love, you are on this spot for this moment, and you will continue to expand and deepen in that path. And we'll look at what a roadmap tonight. We'll look at a roadmap that can guide you on that journey. And so we're talking about divine union. So I wanted to start with this idea of union and some of the ways that we unite. And it's interesting when we think about divine union, like I want to come together, the imagination of where does one body end and the other begin, that we are in the oneness of love, that we will be together forever if that's our path. And so this idea of union, what gets confusing is that we try to jump to union, but there are some prerequisites that you can't have union without. And so I want to start with this circle of wholeness that actually represents you. And it represents that you complete standing in it as an individual, set the stage for the union. If you think, and I'll say this later again, but no one will ever complete you. It requires two whole beings coming together, relating to one another, two individuals that then create a partnership that then allows us, actually, I'll share the next phase. I forgot, I wanted to share this, but if we try to merge, instead of being two individuals in this partnership, if we try to merge, we get this blob that it is nebulous. It has no container. It has no essence to it. The partnership doesn't exist without the two. So we can't merge. We have to be the individuals in partnership, which then allows us to come into this infinite union, this divine union, where it keeps expanding. There is no limit to the love, the passion, and the ecstasy that you can experience when you come into a true union through being you, through two people coming into partnership. So this is the first piece of this idea of union that we want to look at. And then we also want to look at another aspect of this journey, because if you're like me, and I think you are, if you're sitting in a body right now, listening to this or watching this, you are human, and simultaneously you are divine. There is a sacred divine essence to you. And there is a humanness. And both of those must exist simultaneously. All of the messiness of being human is part of what sets the stage for love. And so often we're trying to push that messiness away and try to put on the pretty face, show up like we've got it all together. And that we don't have any flaws. And that we don't have any bad habits. And it's so not true. And when we're in denial of our humanness, we can never experience the kind of divine union that we're talking about. So yes, there is a oneness. There is an absolute divine, unconditionally perfect being that is you. Simultaneously, there is a fallible, imperfect human being. And it is through the two of those things together that you then can come into the kind of ecstasy, the kind of love, the kind of passion that we're talking about tonight. So know, and again, we'll dive into this more actually in training 3, but I wanted to set the stage that you cannot deny in any way, shape, or form your humanness, your imperfections, the ways that I like to say it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the beauty and the mess. All of that gets to be just as equally loved as the sacred essence of the divine being. And it reminds me of the Sanskrit term namaste. The divine in me sees and acknowledges the divine in you. We're talking about partnerships where we see the divine and we honor and see the human. So another aspect of union. And then the one that we're going to spend the most amount of time with this evening is the idea of the divine masculine and feminine and how they relate to each other and how they must coexist. They must coexist. One cannot exist without the other. They complement. They are a whole. And this yin-yang symbol, we'll interchange the words yin and feminine, the words yang and masculine as we go through this training together. And it is the yin-yang symbol, ancient symbol of how our energies express. And let's dive into this. We are talking about energy. We are not talking about gender. At times you will hear me tonight use pronouns, he or she, when I'm speaking of the masculine or feminine. Please excuse that. I am not actually speaking male or female. We are talking about energy. And so this energy of the masculine and the feminine exists in every single body, whether it has wherever it falls on that gender spectrum, whether it falls towards the male end of the spectrum or it falls towards the female end of the spectrum or somewhere in between, those energies still exist. They are about the opposites, the poles, the positive side, the negative side. Not that either one is positive or negative, but it's just like in science, simple science. If we take two magnets, and I'm going to bring these images up so you can see the full of what I'm speaking of. If you take two magnets and you bring the opposite ends of those magnets together, they come together and they stick. And it actually takes some force to pull them apart, to separate them. And at the same time, if you flip one of those magnets, and so you have the positive end and the positive end, they are going to repel as fast as possible. Most of us did that as kids to play with the magnets, and it was so fun to watch one of the magnets flip away. And this energy that we're talking about that creates the chemistry, that creates the magnetic attraction, is these two energies that exist, as I said, regardless of gender and regardless of orientation. And so I really invite you to listen from that place as you go through this. What is true for me? And to know that it is the source of the chemistry, the spark, and the attraction. And if we are bringing feminine energy to feminine energy or masculine energy to masculine energy, no matter how much we try to push those together, like you'll see in that bottom picture, trying to push it together, they're not going to come together. And they're certainly not going to stay. And this is why we end up in friend zone and roommate zone. It is because so often, as I said, and we're going to get to this again in a deeper way in a moment, but that we have neutralized and neutered our energies. We've quote unquote not been allowed to be either one. We've judged the masculine, we've judged the feminine. And so first step is awakening the curiosity within you to discover what is your predominant sexual essence. So if I use these words yin and feminine, yang and masculine, they are an expression of your predominant sexual essence, the way that you predominantly interact with the world. Now, like we saw in this yin-yang symbol, they tend to have one that is predominant. If you look at the darker purple here being the yin side with this circle of yang, one tends to be predominant for us. If we look at this yang side with the circle of yin within, it is, again, one is typically predominant regardless of gender, regardless of orientation, and for some, they are equal, but that is a very small percentage. In the 15 years that I've been doing this, like a handful of people that actually fall in that truly neutral zone authentically. So again, the question is, what is true for you? And so let's put a little bit more depth to what these energies are, how you can begin to recognize them in your body, in the ways that you interact with the world. And I paused there because before I put these words up, some people will question, well, why do you label these words masculine or feminine? And it comes back to the fact that as you feel into these words, and I dive into this deeply in my Soul Love program series, where I get to work with people over a period of several months. And we can really look at the specific energies of each word. And the essence is that you're going to see that masculine energy has some very specific qualities that consistently express themselves, while feminine energy or yin energy has very specific qualities or essences to it. And so from the masculine perspective, it is the energy that is coming off the body. One of the ways to check what's happening in my body in any given moment is if the energy, the way that your energy is moving is coming off of your body, if it's moving forward, if it's pushing, if it's directing, if it's penetrating, that is masculine energy. It has an assertive quality to it. It has a very focused, a much narrower channel, if you will. And so if it's focused, if it's moving forward, that's masculine energy expressing itself. It tends to stand very independently. It tends to be very goal-oriented. It also, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but it's also a very upward and erect energy. Sometimes we'll talk about masculine energy as being a pillar, that pillar of strength, that pillar of presence, something that I can lean on. So this is, again, a short but very succinct and potent expression of the masculine. The feminine, in contrast, you're going to see has many, equal and opposite expressions. So it tends to be a more flowing energy. It tends to be an expansive energy. So the masculine energy coming in and being focused and more narrow, the feminine energy is all embracing, all encompassing. It's actually boundless and infinite. You feel it fully. It is a radiant energy. It is an energy that is filled with light. You will often have that experience of, wow, who is that? Because of the light, the essence, the grace that comes off of that feminine expression. It is relational and collaborative. It is about the community and the connections. And it is also, here's the key word that's going to help you feel energy with the feminine. The feminine is a receptive energy. It's often harder to feel than the masculine energy, but it is the energy that is almost concave. It's like you'll feel yourself falling back into the energy as it opens and allows life to come in. And through that receptivity, it also creates the creativity that is this full expression of the feminine. And so again, remember, and we're going to go a little bit further into this, and then we're going to ask you some questions that are going to help you get clear on what your essence is. But for right now, keep staying in that curiosity. How do these show up for me? What are these expressions like for me? What do I resist? What do I grasp onto? What am I attracted to? Begin to be in that curiosity. And then let's talk about this idea that they've been neutered and neutralized. If we go back to really, and again, I dive into this deeper in some of my other trainings, but let's give you the foundation, is that relationships have evolved over many generations. And the women's movement was one of the first big shifts to bring us into the more recent forms of relationship. And part of that was to absolutely gain equality. So there is a huge yes support for the women's movement. And there is also the place where, because what happened was that we saw that the masculine had the power. And so what ended up happening for the most part is that many learned to model that masculine power, to take charge, to take control, which is all totally available to someone that rests in a feminine essence. But how we do that is going to be what we're going to continue to talk about. And so there was a way that we pushed, drove, intended for the masculine to be turned down while the feminine was turned up. But the way that we did that was often with masculine energy. So we ended up turning down the masculine, turning down the feminine, and trying to equalize and normalize these two energies, but we took away the differences. We took away those two poles, the positive and the negative. At the same time, as more women stepped into the corporate world, emotions were not supported. They were not allowed. They were judged massively. So another expression of the feminine that was not allowed. So turn that down. And then the men who wanted to support, and in this case, I am saying men and women right now, but the men that wanted to support, they said, all right, let me turn down my assertiveness. Let me turn this down to show my respect. But at the same time, they cut off part of who they were. And the invitation for us now is to wake up to not that one is better than the other, not that one is stronger than the other or more powerful than the other, that they are both equally and different in their power. They are equally powerful and different in that power. We're going to touch on the beginning of the power model that I work with in my programs tonight, because they are radically different. Power is the ability to influence. How we influence is very different from a feminine perspective and a masculine perspective. And I can absolutely tell you they are equally influential. And so watch for, we're not going to get into the belief systems tonight, but watch for the ways that you have come to judge through your beliefs and through your experience, the masculine and the feminine. Because after working with thousands of people, I can tell you that the vast majority of those beliefs are not true. So let's talk about the truth of the yin and the yang. And that, again, these two energies, if we look at this yin-yang symbol, there is the yin within the yang within the yin. And what happens is very often we've had them either overamped or underamped. And so here's a modified look at this yin-yang symbol, and I'm going to use myself as the example here. Go back to, I said I had an engineering degree and I was climbing the corporate ladder in the oil and gas and high-tech industries. And I was doing this in the 90s in Houston with the Good Old Boy Network. And oil and gas was completely masculine, completely men. And I was going to prove my way to the top. So I modeled that masculine energy. So I took that energy within that symbol, the yang energy, and I way expanded it so that there was no chance you were going to see any feminine in me. It was as if I could even make that circle so much bigger where it completely obscured my femininity. Any yin was not allowed to be there. And I've watched masculine beings do the same thing. I don't want to be one of those men. I want to be one of the good guys. So they turn up that yin energy. It's the acronym that we hear so often, the SNAG, the sensitive new age guy. Or where are all the strong men? He's my great friend, but no, I'm not attracted to him. I love hanging out, but I don't want to make love. And so that yin obscures the yang. This does not work. In the same way that others turn down all of their yin. So the yang, when we're going to look at each of these four examples in more detail, and what does that look like and what happens in our lives when we do this, but we'll turn the yin completely down. So it's barely a pinprick. We'll turn the yang completely down. So it's barely a pinprick. And this doesn't work either because we end up selling ourselves out and we don't actually know how powerful we are. The second image there is actually one of the ways that we limit our power. So let's go into more depth with that. And let's start with the overamped yin, the nice guy. And what that looks like is, again, trying to be nice, trying to be that good guy, trying to be the one that everyone loves. But why doesn't she want to make love? Or why does that passion fizzle after a few months? It's because, again, we don't have that spark. We've neutralized that energy. This also shows up as people-pleasing. It shows up as the desire to make sure that I'm loved and to do it all right so that nobody can ever think that I'm a bad guy, if you will, that I'm one of the good guys. But in the meantime, because of all the people-pleasing, you never get what you want. You abandon your needs, your wants, your desires, and you've probably even forgotten that you did. But if you don't know for sure what it is that you need, want, or desire, this is something to pay attention to. There's an indirectness because it's much more about figuring out what she wants or what he wants so that they'll be happy. And if they're happy, then you're happy. So rather than being direct and decisive and clear with your desires, you'll beat around the bush. There is also a way that the power, not just in bed, this word impotent isn't just about bed. It is about how we create things in the world, what we generate. We talked about the yang energy, the masculine energy being a generative energy, produces results. It drives us to a goal. But if we lose access to that yang energy, we don't have that potency. We don't have that power to create the vision that is so much of the masculine. This is another piece. What is the mission, the purpose of the masculine? And we can't dive into that here. But it is another piece when I work with the masculine beings on this journey, is what is it that is that purpose, that is that drive, that propels that energy forward? In this, because of the people pleasing, because of making everyone else first, there is buried resentment. And so with each of these scenarios, the overamped and the underamped, we're going to talk about what are the fears and what are the beliefs that go with it. At least we're going to, the basic ones. And there's a fear of being disrespectful. As I said earlier, I don't want to be one of those guys. I want to be the good guy. So there's a fear. And so there's so much fear of being too assertive or disrespectful that you play the complete opposite end of the spectrum, when the truth is really somewhere in the middle. And so with that, then there is also an abandonment. There's a fear of abandonment that shows up, and that's why the people pleasing shows up. I want you to love me. I want you to be connected with me. I want you to be with me. I don't want you to leave. And so, but that also creates the unconscious behaviors that actually end up pushing the love away. And again, we're going to get into that in more detail as we talk about the spiritual path in training 3. But as you're trying to keep the love, you're actually pushing the love away. And the belief, as I mentioned earlier, is that somehow being assertive is a bad word. Assertive is not a bad word. It is a standing presence of the masculine. And when the yin, the heart, the love, the compassion is present with that, the yang is so amazing. So we're not talking about shutting off the heart. It is the assertiveness married with the heart that is so potent. So then we look at the flip side, the overamped yang, and what we might call superwoman. And as one of my teachers said many years ago, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. And that's what so many women are trying to do. And so this drive, and so often this is the overworked. This was me. Like, I did not want to be feminine. Don't associate that word with me. No way, no how. And you'll see in some of the beliefs what I believed when we get there. But that driven, overworked, there's a way that, I was all about, and sometimes it still shows up, that make sure I'm in control, taking charge. And oh, by the way, when we do that, if we are in a heterosexual relationship, if we are the yin attracted to the yang, as I overamped my yang, I emasculated the yang men in my life, and no wonder they didn't stay. I pushed them away. They're like, no, this isn't working for me. I can't please you. It's never enough. Then there's an expression of not being able to trust, that I can't trust enough to actually be in my yin, to be in my heart. Very often, these are the exhausted women. Totally me. There's a way that they're beginning to recognize that some of the burnout issues are because the yang energy is not innately natural to most female bodies, not at the level that we're running it. And so we're recovering from that. I mentioned orgasms were elusive for me. Orgasms are all about surrender. And ask yourself, particularly if you might be either a female body or a yin body, how easy is an orgasm if you're in control? If you're holding on to control, can you have that orgasm? It doesn't work. So all of this is tied together. again, there's buried resentment because I got to do it all and nobody's showing up and nobody's there to take care of me. Nobody's there to own up to their responsibilities. And this is part of the story that we tell ourselves. The fears, the fear of being the fear of being taken advantage of somehow being controlled. So we overtake that control. And simultaneously, there's an incredible fear of vulnerability. Like if I open my heart, I'll somehow get hurt. And yet it is in that open heart that we find the love and the connection. And honestly, the safety. And that's something that, again, I can't fully dive into. I want to give you guys so much. But the truth is the safety is in the vulnerability. The power is in the vulnerability. And so the beliefs that come here, these were mine. And these are just the beginnings. Like we can do pages and pages of unconscious beliefs that actually hold us back and hold us in these patterns of overamped and underamped. But the belief that the feminine is weak or that receiving is needy. And so now let's look at the contrast. Let's look at if we're a yang being and we've closed off that yin. And not a great word, but it is that arrogant alpha asshole that we might judge that, again, we're going to see with compassion here that it's a pattern that's closed off that beautiful heart space, that beautiful yin connected, empathetic space that is the heart of love. And this can show up as arrogant. It can show up as conceited. It can show up as heartless. I'll do anything, whatever it takes, railroading over someone or a whole bunch of someone's. There's an idea of, I don't need that love shit. I don't need connection. I'm fine on my own. I don't need any of that stuff. I don't need you. And it pushes away connection. Again, we can't feel like emotion, which is part of the yin. I'm not feeling it and I don't want to feel it in anybody else. So I am going to do everything I can to tone down the emotion in somebody else. Now I want to say something here. These overamped and underamped, you may be seeing, even if you're not that fully overamped or the fully underamped, but you may recognize that you do some of these things. We're looking at this at the ends of the spectrum and pay attention to how some of these dynamics may play out in your own journey. Very often, because there is that resistance of connection, there is a buried loneliness that is completely cut off. Like I'm not willing to admit or acknowledge that loneliness is there. Some of the fears, that fear of being dominated, being controlled, like I am always going to be in charge. No way, no how, anything but that. Same thing, in charge at like an absolute fear of not having control, which also ties into an absolute fear of vulnerability. Anytime we're over-resting, over-depending on that yang, there is a fear of the vulnerability because the vulnerability is a core expression of the feminine. And remember that it is power. Vulnerability is power. And again, at this moment, you may be able to feel that. And trust me, as you get a chance, if you choose to dive into the next trainings or more work with me, vulnerability is the gateway to love. It is the gateway to intimacy. And here, the belief that softening, opening is dangerous. And there's also an idea that I am not enough and I am going to prove to you, because I am so not going to admit my vulnerability or my weakness. I'm going to prove to you how strong I am. And then on the flip side, the underamped yang, where we're in denial, the yin is not in relationship with her yang. It shows up as that passive or doormat or needy energy where we are taken advantage of or we don't get what we want. And so there's a lack of boundaries here. And one of the ways that shows up is that we say yes when the truth is no. Like we go along with things that are really not okay with us because we want somebody to love us. So we grasp on, we'll do whatever it takes to try to get that love and get that connection, which is the yin, but we're overamping that yin, we're underamping the yang. This is where there is self-sacrifice. Like naturally, we're going to self-sacrifice, especially as feminine beings. And we over self-sacrifice. We go at the bottom of the priority list where these needs are not being met at all. And in this case, where we're grasping for that love, there is such a fear. There's a buried unlovability and a fear of not being enough, a fear that we won't be loved. So we got to do. We got to say yes, say yes, say yes, so that they'll be in connection, so that there'll be a love with us. And so it is this idea, just one of the beliefs that shows up here is that if I say no, I won't be loved, that I'm somehow not enough. And here's what's interesting. As I laid out these lists of how do you recognize which patterns you're playing, I actually had a distinction earlier today that even as I looked at myself, I was simultaneously overamped and underamped on the yin. I had so much yang, but I had no boundaries. I said yes all the time when the truth was no. I didn't honor myself. I abandoned myself all the time. And I was hungry to prove that I was lovable. So what's actually happening, and the reverse is true for the yin within the masculine beings. But what was happening is I had this pseudo yang because I wasn't in touch with the true yang. And that's the invitation that we're looking at here, is what is the true yang within the yin? And for the yang beings who have overamped that yin, it's actually because they're not in touch with their true heart. They're not in touch with that pure light that is within. And so the fake yin, the pseudo yin, because they're not connected to the true yin. Again, the invitation to come into this true alignment of where is your yin and where is your yang. And you have to be it to have it. So for the men that are maybe thinking like, I don't know about this, or the masculine beings, I should say, I'm not so sure. Like if you are turned on by the pleasure of a woman, if you want her to surrender and open and you love watching, and again, I mean to say feminine being, but if you love that surrender, then it is about you showing up as the container, as the safe space for that feminine to surrender into. And until you hold that space, she's never going to show up. And the feminine beings, the same thing. The masculine will not show up until you open into the depths of your heart, the depths of your sensuality, the depths of your pleasure. That's the invitation. And you have to be it before you can have it. This starts with you. Going back to that wholeness piece, this is another piece that relates to that. So there's really we've got the yin-yang relationship between two, but it is the yin and the yang dynamic within each of the two that actually sets the stage for the partnership. And I said I would just touch on power. This is an entire training in and of itself. There's a full model of how masculine and feminine power express themselves. I wanted to bring in presence. Presence is one of the ways that we have power. And the masculine presence has more of that erect nature that we were talking about. The feminine presence, yes, it's upright, but it has a more graceful, expansive energy. And so I just want to give you the highlights so that you start to explore what's the truth here, how they move. I actually want to give credit to this particular way I'm going to describe movement to Rachel Jane Groover. And that masculine movement, the power of the movement comes from conscious assertion for the masculine. For the feminine, it is conscious attraction. And this is one of the ways that feminine beings overwork themselves, is they forget that they actually have this power to attract and magnetize that which they need, that which they desire. And it is potent, potent, potent power. So there are multiple more elements to this model, but to begin thinking about these distinctions in power. And one more, again, we're not diving into this, but I wanted to open the possibility of this to you. And the Dalai Lama said, I think it was 2011. I may have not have the year, but several years ago, about 10 years ago, he said that the Western woman, he indicated in his words, what if the Western woman would save our planet? And the question that I have is, what if it's not the Western woman, but what if it is the yin that we all need to come into authentic alignment with? Masculine beings, that yin within; feminine beings, the yin that then the movement comes through, the purpose and the mission comes through. And purpose and mission exist in both masculine and feminine beings, just how it's expressed is different. So that possibility of what if it was so important for all of us to come into relationship with this yin energy. And so your sexual essence, as we looked at these masculine and feminine qualities, these yin qualities, these yang qualities, ask yourself, where do you spend most of your time? Where have you been living in that masculine and feminine expression? And then I want to ask you 4 quick questions that will help you. When I work with people in the longer term programs, we actually go through about 10 questions. But these 4 are going to give you a really good indication. And when you answer these questions, I want you to answer them from the place of you are completely safe. You get to write the script. You get to have it your way. You cannot get rejected. You cannot get hurt. You cannot get abandoned. That it is absolutely your way, your designed life. So the first question, and these are short, you don't need to write anything down, you'll remember, is ask yourself, if you got to pick your ideal lover, would they be physically larger than you or physically smaller than you? If you picked so question 2, if you picked your ideal lover, would they be stronger than you, i.e. they pick you up and move you across the bed? Or would you be physically stronger, you pick them up and move them across the bed? Third question, in a courting or dating situation, would you prefer to be the one that asks out, picks up, and takes to dinner? Or the one who is asked out, picked up, and taken to dinner? Again, you can't get rejected. You get to have it your way. And then the last question, the 4th question is, if you were in a hot, steamy kiss up against a wall, knowing it's always fun to switch spots, but if you were in that hot, steamy kiss up against the wall, more times than not, would you be the one against the wall being kissed or the one facing the wall giving the kiss? And so now let's look at the answers to those questions. If you picked that you prefer a lover that is larger than you, stronger than you, that you want to be the one asked out, picked up, and taken to dinner, and the one against the wall, those are going to be the feminine expressions. If you prefer that your partner is smaller than you, that you move your partner, that you do the asking out, the picking up, and the taking to dinner, that you are the one facing the wall, those are masculine expressions. And if you're like so many that I work with, you may well be surprised. I was like, I'm not feminine. And I was so feminine. So feminine. And again, for the masculine, how many masculine men thought, oh no, I'm pretty feminine. And then to realize that we're out of alignment. And this is why it's so important. It doesn't matter what your essence is. It matters that you find out what is true authentically for you and bring your life into alignment. There was a woman at one of my retreats recently, and she came up to me and we were talking about the masculine and feminine dynamic, and she, in this beautiful, very feminine way, went, I'm so masculine. And I went, wait a second, let's look at this. And it's so common to think that how we're showing up in the world, I showed up completely masculine. But the essence, the truth, was very feminine. So there's a misalignment. There is an inauthenticity that we are inviting you to come back into alignment with. And so that's the lived energy. How are you spending your time? I was spending my time completely masculine. And then what is that authentic energy? And for most, there's a gap. And our job then is to close that gap so that how you're showing up is who you authentically are. And that becomes ecstatic. And that is now what allows you to attract or re-attract, if you're already in that relationship, to attract the one that is the match for you, that is the opposite, but yet the soulmate, soul partner, where you get to dive deeper and deeper into this ecstasy, into this passion. And so as we go a little bit deeper, another way to look at this, and I could have told you, even as I said, I'm so masculine, what do I prefer in a partner? Well, I was totally attracted to the masculine men, but I pushed them away. Even if I attracted them, the passion fizzled within a few weeks. So it is also an indicator of what it is that you prefer in a partner. And then also looking at, like I did, if I attracted a masculine partner, they went away. And most of the time I was like, why do I keep attracting all the passive men? Why do I keep attracting all the nice guys? Well, because I was attracting my opposite. And so that question, are you showing up opposite or the same? How are you showing up in relation to the one you're attracted to? So these are the inquiries. And inviting you, I will answer a few questions at the end of this tonight. And then I hadn't planned this and I hadn't announced it, but I've been feeling it today, getting ready. I'm going to add on a Q&A session at the end of our training series. So that's my plan in this moment, that we will have an additional opportunity for Q&A at the end of our series. So absolutely put your questions in the chat box, in the questions box. If I don't answer them tonight, then I will also get back to you between now and then. Okay, so let's keep going. And I said this when we talked about the path in the beginning. In no way is this a destination. Love keeps expanding. One of my sacred sexuality teachers used to say, well, what are your pleasure boundaries? How open are you? How open to love are you? Because we don't realize that we actually have boundaries to our pleasure. There's only so much pleasure we allow. And so we can keep opening and opening. There's only so much ecstasy that we allow. We can have beliefs that we are not supposed to feel that good. That, oh my gosh, what does that mean if I'm allowing this to move through my body? How vulnerable can I be to really experience the depth of love? So this is a journey. It is not a landing point. It is not a destination. Reminding you, we talked about the individual and then the partnership and then the union. This sacred path of love and ecstasy, sacred being that which we hold as reverent, that which we treasure, that we hold precious. Ecstasy being, not just in bed, we're not just talking, yes, great sexual ecstasy, but it's the ecstasy of life fully lived, the juiciness, the fulfillment, everything that we can have in life, in bed and out, a life fully lived. So that's the kind of path that we're talking about. And I want to just quickly say to the singles that sometimes think, I got to have a partner to do this. And to the couples, I don't know if we can figure this out. Like, don't wait. Do this now. Because if you're in a relationship and it's challenging, now is the time. Like, if you're here and you're listening to this, if you're watching this, something has called you to it. Honor that. And singles, you do not need a partner. I was actually saying to somebody earlier that it's sometimes easier honestly, to start this path as a single. I work with tons and tons of couples. It is totally doable, but there's a way that the singles have some advantage because you, yes, have to clean up the past and let go of what you've been carrying, the baggage. I talk about that in one of my other trainings. You have to leave that baggage behind. But when you come into alignment with you, you're going to attract an entirely different partner in the future. An entirely different partner, and you're going to meet them heart to heart, body to body, soul to soul in an entirely different way than if you wait and then try to figure it out once you have them, because you won't have attracted the right person, quote unquote. So this path of soul love, it is about being you. It is about the relationship that you have with you. It is about your soul. And when you are fully being you, when you are ecstatically authentic, here's how I define ecstatically authentic. It is the place where you so like who you are, you so love being you. Like the concept of self-love is really nebulous, but I break that down into something that you can absolutely get. What does it mean to be in relationship with me? Because the strength of the relationship with you determines the strength of the relationship with someone else. I'll say that one again. The strength of the relationship with you determines the strength of the relationship you can have with anyone else. And when you have that kind of relationship to you where you are no longer willing to sell yourself out, settle, or twist yourself into a pretzel trying to get or keep love, you are free to attract the kind of love that we're talking about here. And confidence is not something you have to go find. It is a byproduct. It is absolutely inherent in being who you are. It comes naturally. And then the transition point between those two phases is when you, and we'll get into this actually, and actually I'm going to hold that thought. I'm going to come to that in the next slide, how you transition between these two phases. But the second phase is where you're focused now on you and the other. It is this place of ecstatic intimacy, connecting heart to heart, body to body, soul to soul. It is a place of true coming into connection and partnership that sets the stage. You can't have the union, you can't have the ecstasy without the authenticity and the intimacy. They set the foundation. And this is then where the chemistry comes in. It is also an evolution of your soul, where I talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, the light and the shadow, the messiness and the beauty. This relationship with you, I'm willing to look into myself and tell the truth and see me. Into me you see. And you know you are sacred. Then this is where you become available. When you allow yourself to be seen in all of who you are, that's when you become available for love. That's where you can actually trust love. And until that point, you will never actually trust and surrender into love. And that takes us into me you see. So now I saw into me, now I'm letting you see into me. And it becomes sacred other with sacred you. And then we can come into this space that we talked about in the beginning, the human and divine. Into me you are, this divine union and the sacred all. This is that soul's pathway of love. And it is, I've mentioned some of these, but the willingness to be seen, the availability for love. And then the romantic love, the self-love, the romantic love, the divine love, or the unconditional love. So many of us want to be loved unconditionally, but we won't love ourselves unconditionally. There's no way that we'll ever feel that from another. And so this journey down the fullness of this depth and spectrum of love. And I'm not going to go into this in a lot of depth, but we've got barriers to where we feel like we're not enough or we're somehow not lovable. We've got our judgments. And the same thing, we have our judgments about partnership. We have our judgments about opening into ecstasy. We have our resistances. These are the things that we've got to move through and clear out so that you can live in those full expressions of you. And the place where you have that self-acceptance, that self-respect, the worthiness, the confidence. And then you share that respect and cherishing and embracing and honoring with another. And then getting into that space where you are treasured, worshiped, where you feel that union, that oneness. I mentioned, and again, this is one that just to give you a taste of, you can walk up this diamond of sacred you, climb the ladder, if you will, into a space of full self-love, self-acceptance, self-actualization, if that's a word that resonates with you. But it is that place of coming from empty and needing to the place of full expression. And again, it starts with you. It starts with waking you up, connecting, and then enjoying the fullness of ecstasy that is available. And so let's talk about just briefly, like, how do you walk that path? And it is a journey. And I would say that there are 3 core phases or parts to this journey. That first part is all about you, how you're showing up. The second part of the journey invites you to look at how you're relating and to walk that part of the path with not necessarily a partner. I have many people that walk all of these phases not in relationship, but we are looking at the dance in the second part of the journey, how we are relating, whether that's dates, whether that's colleagues, whether that's family. When people dive into soul love, they see sibling relationships change, parent relationship change, child relationships change, business relationship change, romantic relationships change. When we walk this path and you get right with you, and then you discover how to relate soul to soul, and then that third phase of enjoying all of the benefits, the ecstasy, the union, that's the third part of the journey. And then the cool part is that you get to, it's sort of like a spiral. I don't have an image of this in this particular set of slides, but it just gets better and better. The more authenticity, the more intimacy, the more ecstasy. And the more that we want ecstasy, we just bring more intimacy, and then we bring more authenticity. So it keeps getting better and better and better all the time. And so if you were going to take one step beyond listening to this training, because I've said a bazillion times, like, I can only give you so much, I wanted to let you know briefly how you can take one more basic step. And that is where you shine a light on your personal path. What does it look like? How is this path customized for you? Where do you turn right? Where do you turn left? Where are your speed bumps? Your personal path. And get totally clear where those detours have been, where the roadblocks, where the potholes are, so that you can pave over them, reroute the path for you. And part of that is knowing where you're going, reconnecting with those deepest heart's desires. And as we talk about it in a moment, I'm going to share with those the ways that you extinguish the love, you extinguish the passion, you extinguish your heart's desires without knowing it. So that we're going to talk about in just a second, because your desire is so important. And it's not just a hope that you can have something different. It's a knowing. Even if you're scared out of your mind, which, believe me, I have been. And when I hit those edges, I still am. But it gets better and better and better. And then what are the absolute best next steps that you can take from where you are right now to where you want to be? What are the best steps that you can take? And the way that I help someone do this is through private sessions. One-on-one, you and I talking about your personal path of love, your alignment with the divine masculine and feminine. And this is for singles or it's for couples. And not in every relationship, not every couple or both people, not both partners are always willing to do this. So if you're in a relationship and your partner isn't ready yet, you start, because when you change, the relationship changes. So there's an opportunity to spend an hour, sometimes more, with me diving into exactly what's going on in your love life and setting that path. What are those best next steps? And if you decide that you want to do this tonight, you can immediately schedule on my calendar. I have a session available tomorrow. And so you can literally take that first step on your path. If you want to do this, these are $247 on my website. They're a $497 value. They're $247 if you go to the website right now. If you use the code Divine Union, and I'm going to give you the website, it's ignitingsoullove.com. And if you go there and you use the code Divine Union and you're one of the first 10 people to do it, you will register for not $247, but for $97. And you're going to get an additional bonus, which is that you get to download this entire training series and keep it for you personally. If you don't do this, there will be a replay period of about a week, and then they won't be available. But if you register for this session, you get the entire series downloaded. And again, that's ignitingsoullove.com. Use that code Divine Union, and it's for the first 10 people that register. I've got 10 spots in the next 10 days. So I am honored, as I said in the beginning of this, if this is your path, there is nothing that I would want to do more than support you in having this love, because I know how transformational it is. I know what it's done for my life, and I get the privilege of watching men and women go, oh my God, I didn't know this was possible. And that's what I want for you. So before we close, let's talk about the 5 ways that you unknowingly extinguish that spark. And the first one is that you try this masculine feminine dynamic that we've been talking about, that you try to be equal, the same, independent. There are blogs on my website. Equality kills passion and independence builds barriers. It is not about being same. It is about being authentic and coming together with those differences that opposites attract, not neutralized, but fully expressed. And through that full expression, then the spark and the passion and the connection and the depth is available. But the minute that you try to turn that down, there's actually an article that came out in the New York Times online a few years ago. Do equal marriages have less sex? The answer was yes. It turns down that energy. The other one is, we talked about that first phase and who you're being. If you aren't in that confidence, if you sell yourself out, if you people please, if you twist yourself into that pretzel, it is not sexy. And you're trying to make the other person happy, but in the meantime, they're going, maybe. It's not where that spark of love and passion shows up. You complete me. Jerry Maguire, the movie, did not have it right. There is no way that someone else can complete you. You are not broken. We'll get into this more in training 3 as well. There is nothing missing from you. You are not broken. When you find your wholeness, when you not even find it, it's already there. When you know it. When you know it as true as you know your name, love will become so much more available and so much more powerful for you. So do not think that anyone will complete you, because the minute that you do, you grasp on, you pull, and it flattens the energy. It zaps the energy. This same thing going back, where you think that you can just merge into that blob and we're just like this one thing. It has to be. Partnership requires 2 whole beings, 2 sovereign, independent beings that can create interdependence. But you can't have interdependence, you can't have partnership, you cannot have unity without sovereignty. And if you give up yourself, it is not sexy. If you try to merge, it is not hot. And then, if you were trying to figure out the future, should I trust this person? Is this person going to hurt me the way my last partner hurt me? Are they different than my last partner? What are they going to do in this situation? And you put up all these walls of protection and all these strategies to try to manage to make sure you don't get hurt. All those walls of protection are blocking you. And this goes back to that statement that I said, that vulnerability is power. And it doesn't mean that you have to set yourself up for unnecessary hurt. Believe me, I tell my clients all the time, like, you do not have to set yourself up for unnecessary hurt. But in order to risk love, you have to risk heartbreak. And there's a way to do that consciously and intentionally that opens the door to loving and being loved in an entirely new way, at an entirely different level that you've never imagined before. And so stop putting up the walls of protection, because what people fall in love with is you, your humanness, your authenticity. That is what the good, the bad, and the ugly, the beauty and the mess. We fall in love with the humanness, not the perfection, not this pseudo proving how great I am. It's a turnoff. It may be fun at first, but in the end, it absolutely zaps that connection. And then I couldn't help it. I had to put a bonus one in. And it's really what I was talking about in trying to figure out the future. But again, that guardedness. If you are trying to be guarded so that you don't get hurt, you will never find the flames of passion. You will extinguish them before they even get started. And so I want to come back to this path. And this third phase, the path of sacred ecstasy, the path of sacred love, that requires the authenticity, that requires the intimacy. When you get into this phase of ecstatic ecstasy, it is the place where the fire of love, the fire of passion burns so brightly that it melts away everything that obscures the truth of love that you are, the truth of the oneness that we are. So this is the invitation to come into this divine union, to come in to this full expression of you. And I will tell you, it is not always comfortable. If you like sitting in your comfort zone will be your discomfort zone. It will be the place where you stay stuck in getting the same things you've always gotten. So it requires getting outside your comfort zone. And we do that, as any person that's in my programs will tell you, it is baby step by baby step by baby step, one step at a time. And when you take a series of consistent small steps, you will go so far, so fast. So far, so fast. So one step. And if you're ready, if you want this, then that session with me, go schedule it now, spend that time with me. I would be honored to help you see that path for you. You can do that at ignitingsoullove.com. You will get immediately an email to schedule on my calendar to fill out a profile. And there are only 10 spots that I've set up for the next 10 days. I hope to talk to you between now and training 2. And just to give you some highlights of what we're up to a week from now, we're going to talk about the 7 biggest differences that wreak havoc between the masculine and the feminine. We're going to talk about the truth of conflict and how to turn that frustration and annoyance and irritation into happiness and connection and even bliss, like that deep, deep joy. We're going to talk about the top 3 ways that you start fights that you don't realize you're doing, but how you actually start the conflicts. We're going to talk about sex and why men and women fight about sex and how to reset that for passion. We're going to talk about the 2 most important things that you can do to set yourself up for divine union. And for the masculine beings that love feminine beings, we're going to talk about the fastest #1 way to end an upset with a feminine. And that's probably worth the entire training, is how do we end our upsets faster and with more love, where conflict truly turns into communion, where we go deeper and we connect more because of that conflict, where we no longer have to fight it, but we can embrace it because it is deepening and transforming and strengthening our relationship. And so that's what we're up to in a week. And I wanted to share this vision to awaken every man and woman on the planet to the path of soul love, self-love, romantic love, intimate love, and divine unconditional love, so that we may all know the deepest of connections, intimacies, pleasures, and joys that are available on this human journey. That's my commitment. And thank you for being here. Thank you for diving in. I will see you next week. I hope to talk to you if your heart is beating faster If you know there are things in the way, then I look forward to speaking with you in that private igniting soul love session. And in the meantime, huge blessings